Propane, petrol, gas.
All the reports I've heard say it's going to be a long, tough winter, even more so than usual. And that's going to be tough on our cars as well as on us. So I've made arrangements to stop here at the Burlington Technical Center to have some of the automotive experts give us some tips on how to help us make our cars last through the winter without dying of dead batteries or having the bodies fall apart. They're Ed Companion and Bob Church. Ed teaches auto body, and Bob Church teaches auto technology. Here we are.
Hi, nice to see you again.
Ed. Thanks for taking the time to walk through this with me. You know, it's not a new car anymore, and I'm hoping I can get it through the winter without too much damage or too much trouble.
Okay.
What would you suggest?
Well, the first thing that we would look at is wash and wax. Do you remember the one the last time was that you waxed the car, or
April,
it was done?
Yeah.
Okay. One thing that we do to see whether or not the car needs wax is we just do a little water test.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take a hose and just spray a little water on.
Okay.
I'll just let this hood down pretty good and see what we've got here. Now, what you can see is that there's a little bit of beading on this side, but it's just coming right off of there in sheets. This car needs to be waxed again. If this was beading up and all separating and just sliding off the car, we wouldn't have to do it. Normally, normally twice a year is a good measure for doing that.
I guess most people do it in the spring and then hope it'll last till the next spring.
Yeah, and you should do it again in the fall. It doesn't take very long. It's inexpensive.
Can you recommend, there are 100 kinds of waxes out there, and I never know when I walk into the store, they all look wonderful, but what do you recommend?
I think for the basic consumer is you forget all the gimmicks, forget about all these flashy ads. Just buy a basic hand paste wax, something you can put on yourself. It'll go on easy, it'll dry, you can take it off yourself, it's easy to use, and it's inexpensive. You should spend about $6 or so.
That sounds reasonable. What else should I be looking for?
Well, there's some other things that we can look at. Why don't we bring it in the shop and we'll take a look at it in there?
Oh, okay. Drive it right in?
Yeah.
All right. Getting chilly out there.
Yeah, we were talking about what else to do with the body, and in here in a better light. The first thing I noticed when you got out of the car, you've got some rust developing on the bottom of the door here.
I see.
That really needs to be fixed now, and now it's an inexpensive repair. If we let it go, it's going to be real expensive.
Oh, that's good to know.
The other thing I noticed when you were driving in is that there were a lot of mud and stone chips and what have you on the bottom of the fender, the door, the rocker panels. If we put some mud flaps on this car, it would stop all that from going up on there. This area here probably needs some paint repair now. It's pretty inexpensive now. If it keeps rusting until you have to replace the door, just to replace this door is about a $600 repair. And so those $20 mud flaps are going to save you a lot of money.
I thought those were just decorations. They really do some good.
In Vermont, they're functional.
I see there's a little ding right there on this.
We also have a paint chip here. Now, some of this doesn't need to go to a body shop. This particular spot right here, you could get a touch-up stick from either a paint store or from your dealer. And if you just touch that up with a little paint so it doesn't turn to rust, then that's going to prevent an expensive repair there.
Is that one of those little things with a brush and
It's a tube of paint. There's a brush in the cap. There's a shaker inside of it. You can put it in your glove box. It won't spill. It's about $4 a tube.
Great. Let's take a walk around and see if we spot anything else.
Well, I think we pretty much covered what we need to do on the body. One other thing I would like to talk about is the interior. That's another area that gets neglected after a car is 4 or 5 years old. All of these doors have rubber weather strips around them. They need to be sprayed with silicone. That'll help prevent freeze-ups and everybody's been locked out of the car because they can't open the doors. Some de-icer in the locks, some graphite in the locks. some silicone around the rubber part. And I see that you have the standard floor mats. Now, the standard floor mats are going to protect the carpet somewhat, but I think some winter floor mats, something that'll absorb water so that it doesn't slosh over and get into the carpet, would be a lot better.
Well, when a solid rubber, like a basin, or is it something that just has a rubber backing?
Something with a basin to hold the water so that when it starts to fill up, you can actually take it out of there and dump it out, rather than have it slosh over and get inside on the carpet.
I see. Okay, great. Is there anything else?
Well, I think we've covered everything that we should on the body, but I think our next step is to go up and see Bob Church up in the Auto Technology Department and see what he has to say about under the hood.
Okay, I'll see you up there.
Okay.
Thanks. Jump on Winter rather than having Winter get the jump on me the way it did last year. Perhaps you could give me some tips to help keep the buggy going over the winter.
Sure. What type of service have you done recently?
Oh, not much since spring.
No?
In fact, nothing since spring.
Really? How many miles have you put on it since the spring?
About 12,000.
Wow. Okay. That's there's some preventative maintenance things that you need to take care of throughout the year. It doesn't... changing your oil, for instance, really should be done like every 3,000 to 4,500 miles, and that, yeah, and that information is, as well as coolant changes and that type of thing, is in your owner's manual. So it's really something to keep in mind when you purchase a vehicle and run the vehicle, that there is a preferred maintenance procedure.
After 6 years, maybe I'll read the book.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, some of the vehicle manufacturers are now producing videotapes so that you can sit back and be a couch potato and watch it and go through it. So it is interesting. But since we're talking about oil, just to start it, I have a couple demonstrations that I can show you in regards to what happens when you don't change your oil periodically. So let's go over and we'll take a peek.
I thought oil lasted forever.
Yeah, no, sometimes that's not true. So, okay. Just to give you some examples of what happens when you don't change your oil. On this particular engine, it came in with an engine knock. It was making a lot of noise. And when we started to disassemble it, what we noticed is inside the cylinder head is all this gook. And this is a result of not changing the oil.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's real bad.
Is that an unusually bad one? Or
no,
is that mine going to look like that?
It is unusually bad. Oil should be changed a lot more frequently than it was on this particular car. Very similar to your body and your arteries and so forth. Eating a fatty food diet tends to clog up those arteries. Well, in an engine, what we have is little oil galleys or oil arteries that the oil is supposed to pass through. And as you can obviously see, all this sludge that's developed in here won't fit through these holes.
No, I can see that's a mess.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, changing...
Eventually, it'll just keep from cleaning the engine.
Right. Eventually, you'll have some problems, as this engine did, if you don't continue to change your oil.
Do you put something in to clean that out, or you have to have somebody pop that?
Yeah, you really, when it gets this bad, it gets a little bit more involved to clean this.
So that's where you start paying for not changing the oil.
Absolutely. Again, 3,000 to 4,500 miles is a typical mileage range for changing the oil.
So I hope I haven't gone too far already.
It's important to keep that in mind, periodic maintenance.
Thanks.
Okay.
You know, I noticed it was running a little warm the other day when I let it idle. I was waiting for somebody. It seemed to be heating up. I've never noticed that before.
Well, sure. We'll check the coolant level. What I want to show you also, getting back to the oil a little bit, is aside from changing the oil periodically every 3,000, 3,500, 4,500 miles, you should periodically check it to make sure that it's full. You can't go by the color of the oil. A lot of times people pull the dipstick and they say, oh, gee, the oil's black. Well, you know, it's going to get black. You can't go by that. You really need to go by the mileage. And here you're down over a quart. Oh, yeah. So running the engine a little low on oil, that's not good for it either. So it's important to keep that in mind. Okay.
Good point. Right. Time for a change, huh?
Yeah, time for a change, and more frequent changes. Okay, as far as the coolant, as always, as it says on the radiator cap here, not to remove it when it's hot. So what I always do is generally just touch the radiator, and if it feels where I can put my hand on it, then I can remove the cap. But use some caution and be careful, because if it is hot, you can get burned.
Comes out like Old Faithful.
Right. Yep. Okay. Now, typically, what you should do yearly is check the condition of the coolant to make sure that it will not freeze on you. So what you do is you use a coolant hydrometer, and what you do here, and get this situated, is we'll draw a little coolant up out of the radiator. And as you can see, this is pretty dirty stuff.
Looks like the
here.
oil.
Yeah, it looks. Yeah. Well, we sure got a good specimen for a show.
Makes the
here.
point, huh?
Well, it's something important to keep in mind. You'll notice that the temperature that this is good to is minus 60. I mean, you could go polar bear hunting in Alaska with this car as far as the temperature, but the condition, the color, is extremely poor.
I see some things floating in
Yeah,
there, too.
it's something that should be changed more periodically. Most manufacturers recommend every 2 years.
So the guy at the neighborhood filling station can take care of that for me?
Right, right. Let me just show you some situations that develop when the coolant isn't properly changed and taken care of.
Okay.
Okay, Dave, as with the engine oil, there was some ramifications that developed from not changing the oil. We have the same thing with the cooling system. Typically, most manufacturers recommend every 2 years. And I have here a brand new radiator, and as you can see, there's little tubes that the water is supposed to travel through. Here's a radiator that had been neglected, and as you can see, the corrosion deposits that have developed on those ports, and it basically restricts the water flow through it.
I can see that. That will happen even with these fancy new antifreezes. That's amazing. That's corrosion?
Right, that's corrosion, and those fancy antifreezes need to be changed periodically. Like I said, most manufacturers recommend every 2 years.
Interesting. I didn't realize. I thought that stuff lasted forever.
Yeah, that's it.
Now, Bob, this car is about 6 years old now. What I don't want to do is fix this along the side of the road when it's 20 below zero.
Right. Well, some of the things you need to inspect periodically, too, is the belts and the hoses. Now, as you can see on this car, it's really kind of tricky to see what's going on with the belts.
Yeah.
But if you look real close, what you're looking for on the belts, and I brought some examples, is on the belts, you want to look and see if you see any cracks or any deterioration in this way. By noticing this before it breaks, you can have it replaced.
Do they get shiny when they're about
Sometimes
to break
they get
or
what they
something?
call glazed, where they will get shiny. This portion here will get shiny. But typically on the newer belts and the newer design, they tend to crack. And once you start to see this deterioration, it's advisable to change it. Otherwise, like you said, you're going to be on the side of the road fixing it, waiting for a tow truck in most cases, so it's something to keep in mind.
And avoid that.
Right, exactly. And the same thing for the cooling system hoses. You just basically run your fingers along them and you look for any soft spots or any cuts or any bruises or anything that way with the hose. Here's a hose that we took off a car, and as you can see, it's all ballooned.
Oh, yes, I see.
Kind of gets
So
real
has
soft
a weak
there.
spot there.
Right. And just on a periodic inspection, typically during an oil change or even just before a trip, you go on a long trip, just look over your car a little bit, and this would have blew on the road, and then you'd be stuck with no coolant.
Yeah, then you are really stuck.
Right. Exactly. Okay. There's a couple,
Great.
Good.
Anything else I should be
Yeah, there's a
thinking
couple
about?
things I want to show you in regards to your tire pressure and keeping an eye on your tires. So
Oh, okay.
we'll go over here and we'll take a look. This tire here, as you can see, it's just destroyed on the inside portion of the tire.
More bald over here, and
Right.
it doesn't look like it's had anywhere at all.
No, this tire was 6 months old, had about 6,000 miles on it, and the reason why it wore this way is because the angle that the tire hits the ground was not correct. So it was, in theory, driving down the road like this. Okay, so it put all the weight of the vehicle on the inside tread. So, it's important to keep that in mind too. If you notice that the tire is wearing a little unevenly, then it would be a time to check your alignment, your wheel alignment. Some other signs that make you aware of needing an alignment is the car pulling from one side to the other. Typically what you need to do is check the air pressure. The air pressure is good, then you really need to have an alignment or check the alignment to see what's causing that pull.
Shimmy a little bit.
Right. That's wheel balance. Typically, that's wheel balance where as this spins, it needs to be balanced. So periodically, having the wheels balanced would be a good recommendation also.
Well, we're out of time for today, but thanks for Bird Notes with John Merchant. I'm Dave Schaefer. Join us later. I hope you can join us tomorrow on Across the Fence for Bird Notes with John Merchant. I'm Dave Schaefer. Thanks for watching, and a special thanks for the automotive and video production classes at Burlington.